Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF, mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify their fitness journey so they can lose weight, regain their confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Let's go. Hello there. I am super excited to welcome our first official guest because the only other guest that I had was my husband, so he doesn't count. So today we have Lisa Schader. Is it how I pronounce it?
Correct. Yeah, it rhymes with financial educator, and I literally didn't realize that for years.
See, is a sign.
It's meant to be.
We have Lisa Schader, who is a financial educator and the creator of moneyfitmoms.com. She is incredibly passionate about empowering women to reach financial independence through learning the basics of long-term investing. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Did I miss anything?
No, that's it. But just to say, if people heard investing and their heart dropped because they're like, that is exactly why I do what I do, because it's actually incredibly simple when you're talking about long-term. So just know it's not, I'm not here to overwhelmingly intimidate you. Like I am not a finance bro. I am here to be like, it is so simple, right? Find that gap between income and expenses, invest it, and low key, right? Automate. Like it can be so simple. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't want anyone to think they have to have crazy, complicated investing to build long-term wealth. So yeah, if anyone heard investing and was grossed out, I'm here for you.
Was grossed out. I died.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But before we get started, Lisa, I had on my plans to kind of briefly talk about how we met.
Yes. Yeah. We don't need to name names.
Yeah, we're not.
Who she is.
Yeah, we're not going to name names. But basically, the way I met Lisa, actually, I'm going to let you tell the story. What happened?
Okay, from my perspective, I got a message from my friend and said, hey, someone stole the photo of your pre and post surgery. Basically, I had extreme diastasis recti, right? My abdominal muscles were separated.
Yeah.
Like inches, right? It was like the Grand Canyon, and it was painful. And I saw physical therapists, doctors, and they said, you're a good candidate for surgery, right? And it took years.
Which is a tummy tuck.
Physically. Yes, tummy tuck. It's the same. It's the reason why insurance won't cover it, unfortunately, even though it has physical ramifications. And so I did this whole blog post about saving for it financially, because usually insurance only covers a portion of anything. So I put these before and after pictures, but I'm advertising this is the results of surgery, because I did not want to shame women into thinking this is like a fitness result. Like, yes, I took care of myself, but this is surgery. And for some people, you know what I mean? If it's an extreme, that's their best option. Someone who has 1 million followers on Instagram used my picture, not casually, as the advertisement for her fitness program on her Instagram post, on Pinterest, on her website, selling a $50 exercise program. I lost my mind.
And I was right there behind you, pissed. I was not impressed. I was livid.
Yes, because my whole thing is empowering women with education. For someone to mislead women, vulnerable
take their money.
People, and to take their money. It wasn't about having my photo stolen. Like, obviously it's out there. You know what I mean? I knew it was going to be out there. It's not about people saying like my stomach. It was, she's misleading women and wasting their money, but also their time, and also shaming women who think, when they don't get this result from exercise, thinking, oh, I didn't work hard enough.
Yeah.
And right. And I was.
Yeah. And then somebody posted because I mean, that's the people I work with. And I have to deal with the back end of the bullshit of women believing that kind of stuff. And then whenever I saw, I reached out to you and I'm like, hey, I don't know who you are, but I am in with you.
Yes.
And that's kind of how it came to be that we start chatting on Instagram.
Yes. And you were a champion because I was a very small account and I'd never had social media drama. I wasn't used to being bullied because when I came out to say, hey, this is wrong, you need to know the truth behind this before and after picture, her followers came after me and I was ready to quit social media because I was just not prepared for people to be that mean when I felt like, you know what I mean? I was trying to do the right thing. And so people like you who had much more influence, like literally got me to uncrawl from the fetal position because if I hadn't had people like you, I literally would have deleted my account and just gone away, except for people told me that she had done this before. And so it like that and hearing people like you say, no, like,
That's
thank
strong.
you for standing up because it matters. And you standing up is going to help prevent this from happening to other people. But I couldn't have done it without you. You and Get Mom Strong pieced me together and gave me the courage I didn't necessarily have. So thank you.
Oh, I love hearing that. And just to add I do think that you have courage because we've chatted and I know a bit of your story, in which that's kind of what I want to discuss today because, but I think that before we get to that, I hear that you were a very quote unquote nerdy kid growing up, and then you got a very nice and lovely scholarship to a very competitive accounting program where you got a CPA. CPA, for you guys that don't know, is certified public accountant, correct?
Accountant, yes. And I have to legally say I'm inactive status, but yes, I went through the whole certification process, got my master's in accounting with an emphasis in tax. So yes, the nerd is right. I literally was walking around college campus with a copy of the Internal Revenue Code, which is like a picture the fakest book you've ever seen in your life times two. It's 2 volumes, just walking around. And I'd slam those on the testing center and you'd hear someone listening in to be like, what class is she taking? So I can make a mental note not to take that. So yes, financial nerd to extreme, nerd for my whole life. Nerds are my people.
That is so funny that we're having this conversation because right before I got here, FYI, for you guys that are listening this at some time in the future, it's kind of like tax season right now. And I am having a daily mental breakdown back and forth with my accountant. So hearing this and doing this conversation right now, it's just hilarious. Anyway, I digress. So you became a CPA, and then in a very short version, if we can make that, because I know that a lot happened. What happened after you got your CPA?
Yep. So I was raised in a culture where almost virtually every woman I knew was a stay-at-home mom, like where I was raised, how I was raised. And so I did get education because I had it in me, and I did have my mom and my grandma was an immigrant. My mom is an immigrant too. She immigrated as a baby, and they valued education so highly that I knew I was going to take my education as far as I could. But after that, that clock and voices in my head started running where it's like, you are going to become a stay-at-home mom because that's that's what you're supposed to do.
That's goals.
Like get married and have babies.
Hashtag goals.
Yes. Yeah. And so I did, like, once I had the certification, and actually I think I tried to get pregnant before because I knew exactly how long you have to pass exams, you have to work for a certain amount of time. I was literally timing it out so that, reading the books to get pregnant as fast as I could, because I wasn't thinking about building a career. I was thinking about, okay, I'm going to have kids. So I went from working at a Big Four, super demanding accounting firm to being a stay-at-home mom, and had the severe postpartum depression, anxiety, which is not shocking. I did not have a mom's group around me to help figure this out. But I just thought, oh, I'm a high achiever. I'm going to high achieve motherhood. Right?
And then motherhood is like, hold my beer, bitch. Hold my beer.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. It was, I remember at one point having mastitis, and I was like, how do I know? And they're like, well, you're going to feel like you got hit by a train. And I was like, well, that's been every day of my life since this child was born. So I don't really know how to gauge that. I did have mastitis, by the way.
FYI.
Oh it was it got so bad. But you know what I mean? I kind of didn't go back to work, even though literally doctors recommended it, because they're like, mentally, you need that stimulation. Being at home with babies is driving you crazy. But I just thought, no, I'm the best at whatever I do. And I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. So I pushed through it, which was, I do not recommend it. If you have it in you and you have doctors saying hey, maybe you do something at least on the side. Anyway, but I just thought I knew better. But I did start my first financial blog then, because that's when I started to realize that at the time that was mommy blogging was getting big. It was mostly about crafting. And if it was about money, it was about couponing. Meanwhile, people were not getting their employer match on their 401ks. And I just like, it bothered me to see they were chasing pennies when they were literally missing out on thousands, and like the growth of that missing out on hundreds of thousands. And I just couldn't stand that. So I started my first financial blog where we put some crafts on there. I had a co-author at the time, and to bring people in from Pinterest. And then we'd be like, hey, but also save for retirement. We were like trying to work it in.
Question. This is actually a bit off script, but I love that you said that. So why didn't you start talking about retirement? You started with the coupon. You went the coupon
Well,
route.
so yeah, we weren't so much talking about couponing as that's what the blogs were out there. Like couponing was huge. There were like TLC shows about couponing. It was all the rage to like, oh, save money. But I felt like hardly anyone was talking about investing. And that's where the hundreds of thousands were. You know what I mean? People were like, oh, hi, I'm like saving like hundreds on their groceries. And I'm like, cool. But unless you invest those savings, like that is how you're going to actually build wealth. Like no shame to like bargain hunting, but you have to pair it with the next step of building wealth. And so that's why I started talking about that. But what I was saying is like, I would try to pin to Pinterest of like, hey, like this is what a Roth IRA was, and people wouldn't do it. But meanwhile, I did like a DIY headboard that got 1 million views. So people would come for the headboard, and then at the end I'd be like, hey,
by the way,
I'm doing my money challenge.
FYI.
Yes. Yeah. And so that was my plan. Now I feel like it's much more hip and cool, and people are get it and talking about it more, and there's more financial educators out there. So I don't have to be so like tricky to get people interested.
Yeah.
But at the time, that was the best I could figure out.
So you start to do the whole blogging thing, and that was still, and I say blogging thing, I'm not diminishing it. It's hard work. I good for you, but you're still at home with the kids.
Yes. I was still basically playing small because that did start to grow. And as soon as it got to the point where we might have to like hire someone, or heaven forbid use childcare,
oh my God.
I had just been so programmed to play small that I thought, oh no, and like shut it down. Right. And didn't do anything for years. I started a photography business on the side because that felt like a safe thing that I could do, like when my husband was at home and the kids, you know what I mean? And I did that. I just had this in me that it's like anything I'm going to do, I'm going to find ways to do it big. But basically, fast forward to after I had my third kid, and once again, postpartum extreme, and just went through this huge evolution where I realized maybe the idea, anyway, basically, I just found a healthier view of motherhood and career and finding what works best for your family, and not getting stuck in these ideas of like, there is one best way to be a mom or whatever. And that's when I started Money Fit Moms, because I saw how many women were vulnerable, especially moms, because they have children, right? When you throw that in there, and they've sidelined careers. So they're the most financially vulnerable, and yet sometimes like the least able to do these key things to get to the point of financial independence. And I just felt like these are my people, because I know who I'm talking to. I was them, but I was really fortunate in that I had gotten these, right, like degrees and this experience, and I knew the basics and how to help them.
So on that note, I love that you said that women become vulnerable because they have kids. And surprisingly, I do see this a lot, even from a fitness standpoint, where these women are really struggling in their bodies, and like they haven't taken photos with their kids in like years. I had a lady that I spoke to that had not taken photos with her kids since 2020. We're in 2023. Had canceled vacations. And then whenever we talk about investing in their bodies and in being better, oh, my husband will not let me invest that money. And I'm like, but that's not his body. You grew his children. Anyway.
Yes.
So, what were the things that you saw? So I have a whole bunch of feelings about that, but I digress. So what were the things that you saw in your life experience that made you focus on women and moms in particular? What were the things that you saw, like tangible, that you were looking and you're like, oh shit, that doesn't look right?
Yes. Yeah. So I was really fortunate in that my husband and I always had a really equal partnership, right? Even if he was primary breadwinner, he never said, oh, this is like my money or your money. Everything had always been equal, where if it was something that we were working on a goal towards together, right? Whether it's buying a home or like we had these shares goals, but we also had this separate, what I called fun money, right? Where if we had things that were separate financial priorities, the money that we got towards that was always equal because I like fast forward, like started coaching couples and I was shocked to see honestly the seeds of, I hate to use like the abuse word, but financial abuse is a real issue
Yep.
in relationships. And by that, I mean, obviously there's extreme examples like where it can get dangerous. Like you see stories in the news where it like physical abuse to the point of, dare say it, like awful things. They look back at the history of this and it started with not only verbal abuse, financial abuse, not having access to the financial accounts, right? Having very controlled what they're allowed to spend. And I'm not talking about being on a tight budget because we were on a tight budget, but we were working together. We knew, hey, we have these financial goals in order to reach them. Let's keep it tight. But at the same time, the communication was open. I never felt like it was a shared goal. It wasn't like my husband saying, hey, I can't give you access to our checking account because you're a spender. So here's a little bit of money to make it work with groceries and that's it. Like step one when I start to work with someone is have them compute their net worth. And it involves finding out the balance of all their accounts. And that's when they realize they don't have access to their accounts. Not only do they not know what the balance is, they don't even know how to find out. And sometimes it's just like a matter of, here's the password. And sometimes that's when they find out, oh, my spouse doesn't think I'm allowed to see what the account is, even though, right, like it's shared assets.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, oh gosh, this is wrong. Definitely.
And what do you think that was? Yeah. Oh, I have a lot. I have so much, like I have, yes. my body's covered in feelings right now, but why do you think that was? Like, did you see this particularly like with a specific demographic, or did you see this like literally across the board with women from all walks of life?
Yeah, I think the most susceptible group is stay-at-home moms, or if they're a primary caregiver and they're not the primary breadwinner, like most, I would say couples like understand like, hey, we are choosing for you to be the primary caregiver and I'm working because that's what we want to do. But that doesn't mean this is my money, right? This is a choice that we're making, but this is our money. This is what we want to do with it, right? But somehow people think, oh, I'm the one whose name is on the paycheck, therefore it's my money. And it's like, whoa, that's not true.
Oh, and here's the thing too. It's kind of like, yeah, you're earning the money because your ass is not paying for childcare and chauffeur and a chef and to have your shirt ironed. Do you want to pay for that? And I'll go back to work. Deal.
Yes.
And you can tell you have as many feelings about it as I do. I just have a lot more. I have a more potty mouth to talk about it than you do. So
I feel it. You say it.
Yeah. So I have heard you mentioned before that you struggled with the idea that you were not the main breadwinner and that you invested in your husband's career, which by default impacted your earning potential.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit and how things are now, if they have changed, if you have come to terms with it, like what happened?
I think you see this play out in divorce settlements, right? Which, to be clear, like my husband and I are still together, not because I think there's anything wrong with divorce, but because he is a total partner and we are on the same page. But I've seen this play out for other people where they'll get a certain number of years, right, of alimony. But what I think is not always properly accounted for is the opportunity cost or foregoing career development. And so they'll see this timeline of how long they have money for. And right, if you've been investing in a career, you literally can't reach the same amount of earning potential as someone who is a decade further. Like, that's not to say, right, but if you're on the same line, we all know that so much growth is exponential. And so if you're missing out on a decade of growth, that is, that's a real concern. And I've made peace with it in terms of what I have that my husband doesn't have is we are kind of the agreement we came to, because I went through this thing where I really was mourning for the life I would have had if I'd always had this understanding of I'm going to choose what works for my career and my family rather than be a stay-at-home mom at all costs to my physical and emotional well-being, right? I still think we would have had kids, maybe on a different timeline. I probably would have continued to work. But how we talked about it, like, what can we do, right? Like, should he become the stay-at-home parent while I go all in on my career? But I found actually what I really wanted was the freedom to not be dependent on my income indefinitely and be able to choose what I want to do, not based on the income, but on the meaning for me. So by money, it would have made sense for me to go back to working for an accounting firm, right? Like make my way to partnership route. But that's not actually what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was create Money Fit Moms. But because of like the mental difficulties of being an entrepreneur, I wanted the ability to do it at my own pace, only spend as much time as I wanted to, and just totally abandon it when I wanted to take trips to Greece, UK, Paris, like all these things that I've done.
Same.
And that is priceless. Like time freedom is priceless. And so we definitely worked that out. But it was years of conversations of getting him to understand how I felt. And actually, it wasn't until he heard a podcast of hearing a woman struggle with that thing that he kind of heard, like, oh, this is not just Lisa, like on her thing. This is something that women who choose to become primary caregivers with struggle with. And so we kind of heard it for the first time.
It's like you guys are not watching because obviously podcast, but as she's speaking, I'm probably going to give myself a whiplash from so much that I'm shaking my head because I can relate to this in so many levels. As I don't know if you know, but my husband was a professional rugby player. And I also come from the professional sporting background. And whenever I felt pregnant the first time, my husband's life remained unchanged. And meanwhile, I'm like, I loved my child. We wanted to have a child, but I was mourning, like you said, my development within the career choice that I had. And his life remained unchanged. He was still going out for beers with his boys, and he still could come and go as he pleased and all that kind of and the other. And then whenever I try to explain to him, he's like, but you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, no, I can't. No, I can't. So I love that you said that. I love that you said, and you talk about on the same phrase, financial independence and partnership, which they are very different. Like how can you have independence in a partnership? And I think that that's one of the things that a lot of women, one of the questions that I ask actually whenever somebody's applying for my coaching program is, do you need your husband's permission or approval in order to move forward and make an investment in yourself? And whenever they say, yes, he needs to be part, and I'm like, okay, so he needs to be part of the call so we can make the decision together. And, oh, we need to discuss because we're partners. And I'm like, what if he says no? And then they're like, well, then I don't do it. And I'm like, well, that's not really a partnership, is it? So whenever you're talking about, some women might see wanting to become financially independent or financially aware as not trusting their partners or, trying to do their own thing without being together. So what are your thoughts around this? What do you have to say?
Marriage, right, or lifetime partnership where you are invested in each other's lives can actually have huge financial benefits. So studies show that married couples do accumulate wealth faster, right? Even if you divide by 2. And it's because, right, you can have these shared costs. So it's not, I think the reason why they can be together, right? Financial independence, you can reach financial independence faster together. However, having the independence, like, first of all, my husband knows it's all split, right? He knows where we stand in terms of it's our money. However, from the very beginning of our wealth building journey, what we did is we created a huge gap between our income and expenses, and we invested, right? But it is really hard to live on a tight budget. So from the very beginning, we created fund money, but not joint fund money. Like there was that, but we had separate fund money for the very beginning, and you can call it whatever you want. We called it that because it was stuff we had fun, because we realized even though we had these shared large financial goals, we had very different financial priorities in terms of what we like to spend money on, right? So he actually spends more on clothes than I do.
Stop it.
Yes, yeah.
That's hilarious.
He likes his clothes. And of course he's also a nerd. He loves his electronics. And it drove me crazy if he was trying to buy, the newest thing, because he's just an early adopter of technology. And that drove me nuts. And so we realized early on, we have always had this separate money. And it was very small when we, were living on a very tight budget, but it's grown to the point where, we've always negotiated like, how much can we afford? But it's always been separate. It's money that we are not accountable to the other person for, and we track it. So literally, it's funny because we'll make bets like, oh, loser buys the other one dinner. And people joke about that, but we actually mean like, from my fun money, I will buy you dinner, right? And it's serious. But the thing is like, even now that it's bigger money, like even though we both like travel, he'd rather travel less and fly a little fancier, a little first class, whatever. And I'm like, coach all the way, because I'd rather take more trips. And so it just solves so many arguments. So if I wanted to like invest, like I dropped a lot of money to go see Adele last month, or, and it was like a zero, like I talked to him like, hey, I'm talking about these travel dates, but in terms of financially, it literally is none of his concern because I've been saving my money for this thing. You know what I mean? It's just a way to have freedom within this partnership, within these goals.
Yeah.
And so I am a huge proponent of that.
Question, what if he tries to have a say? Because like you have the fun money, and then let's say that you buy something that he perceives as a bit of a waste. Is that something that he would ever say, or you just tell him to shut up and keep on moving?
No, like literally, it's like then I would have to have a say on his stuff. It's just a great way to solve all sorts of arguments because we'll discuss like, oh, is this something that comes out of our family budget, or is this what comes out of our fun money? So we'll kind of like have to set the boundaries of what is a shared family expense and what is like, hey, this really only benefits you. This is your choice.
Okay.
Right. And that's why, but it's always been equal because there was a while where we both kind of had side businesses and the income was about the same. And so it was just easier to be like, oh, okay, this goes into your fund money. But then it came to the point where my business was growing and his regular job was growing. So his side business went away. And so then the fund money was coming from my business. And then of course I had to do like a little counter sexism and be like, buy yourself something pretty. No, I don't do that. That was just like the one joke of like, you know what I mean? Because it was just like logistics. Now it's the way our budget works. It literally just flows. Like it's, you know what I mean? It's just a line item on our budget, but it accumulates because we don't have to spend it every month. Like I'm more of a saver, right? He's more of a spender. Right. But it's so important to recognize like this is our money and how do we want to spend it? But I love having the separate accounts in terms of this is for what you to spend on your priority. And it's me. And it gives so much freedom because I feel empowered. Okay. And like I said, it's totally even like he's the primary breadwinner, but he has the same amount of discretionary personal income that I do, if that makes sense.
I think that's so amazing the way that you guys do that because, and then you also have some households that the woman is the breadwinner and women are, I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, are normally a bit more open to it being our money than sometimes men would be. Maybe I don't know. I don't work in finance, but so whenever we're talking about financial abuse, financial manipulation, some people might look at it as a very quote unquote strong word. And I also heard you say, and I'm going to quote, society grooms women to put themselves in a position of financial abuse and dependency. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I really want to focus on this concept, this idea that there is such a thing as financial abuse. What are the signs that somebody should be looking for?
Yeah. So like I said, the biggest way that women are set up to be more financially vulnerable is the lack of career development, right? And you talk about the disparity of earning between women and men. A lot of it is because women take time off from their careers to be caregivers, not only to their children, but also they're more likely to care for parents, right? For older and younger generations. And we're what's called the sandwich generation. We're taking care of everybody and that affects our career. And if it's a choice, great, but it does have financial consequences. And I can recognize that because I'm choosing to be a caregiver. But that being said, like, how can it still be a healthy choice? So I'm not saying you can't be a caregiver. I'm saying be aware of your finances. So that's the signs to look for. If you don't have access to your financial accounts, if you have no idea what's going on, and when you try to find out, get pushback to have access to your accounts, to have more say in where money is going, that is a flag of something in trouble. And I'm not going to say that if you're in that position that the partner is abusive. It's possible that everyone needs to spend some time getting on board, right? It's possible they feel vulnerable. So, and this is something that when I was a financial coach, that I was super aware of, and that is how sensitive finances are.
Oh, yeah.
So my recommendation for couples is to have a monthly money meeting. Weekly, if you have serious financial issues you're working through. Like we used to go every week over our budget when it was super tight, but eventually it got to the point where everything's kind of humming along. So we just met once a month because we're busy. And the reason why I recommend having a money meeting, not that you're going to figure it all out in one setting, is it creates a safe space where everyone knows you're going into it. You're talking about finances. It's going to get a little touchy, but because it's a dedicated space, people don't feel as attacked, right? Because you're going with the solution mindset. Whereas if you're bringing up finances
at dinner table,
when you think of it, people feel attacked from both sides. So let's say you're in a relationship where one person's the primary breadwinner and one is the primary caregiver. It goes both ways, where if you're saying, hey, we have financial problems, the breadwinner feels attacked because they feel like they're not doing enough to bring home the bacon. They don't have a high enough income. And the person, like often the primary caregiver is usually the household manager who has much more purchasing power about the money in the house. So they feel attacked because they feel like, oh, you're saying I spend too much and I'm literally just trying to like get through the day to make sure we have clothes and food. And you know what I mean? So everyone can feel attacked from both sides. So it's not like a right or wrong. It's a not having a safe space to discuss. So even me, like I'm a financial coach, financial educator, we've been doing these meetings forever. I still get like touchy about things, but it's always a lot better when it's in a set aside time. And I know the best intentions are at heart, and like any kind of trust that's built over time. So if this is your first time having a money meeting, it's going to be a little rough maybe, but every time you meet, you're going to build that trust that you both have your best interests at heart, and you're going to figure out what works for you, because there's no prescribed, like, this is how, you know what I mean? That's how I like to do fun money, but that may not be what works for you. But just being able to come together and work on it is a good sign. Refusal to talk about it or make any accommodations or changes, that is a sign of issues, right?
Yeah, it's a much bigger problem than I think that money normally just becomes where bigger, deeper problems within a relationship normally are showcased. It's normally with money. Hardly ever the problem is the money per se. The problem is much deeper. Right. It's a communication problem or something like that.
Right. You said it's a symptom, not the cause, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you kind of covered that, but I just want to make sure we're not saying, Lisa is not saying that just because you don't have access to your accounts and you don't know this, that it is by default financial abuse. Because I think that a lot of times the earner, the primary moneymaker in the house, will just take on that role to look at the money just because. And the other person never asks. So it just becomes never asked, never given. So, and now what are you doing, Lisa? Because I know that you have 3 kids, right?
Yes.
What are you doing to educate your kids when it comes to making financially sound choices? And because a lot of what we do financially and our relationship with money comes from what we see our parents do, good or bad.
Yes. Yes. So the best way, in my opinion, that kids can gain financial education is interacting with money, right? Like, obviously, I like to talk about investing. My kids are gaining an understanding. So when we have our money meetings, that's when we have the kids' allowance day, and they get money for spending, money for saving, and money for giving away for some sort of, charitable, something that is just helping other people, because we like to help people. And they have, same thing, like basically total control over their buying decisions. Like, we have some more discretion because we're the parents. We're not going to let them buy anything dangerous, or because we live in a, normal size house, anything huge or I'd say loud, but actually we have a lot of loud stuff.
Starting with the actual kids.
Yes. We let them make bad choices with their money in terms of you know what I mean? Saying oh, that's a waste. Like, we'll give them guidance in terms of hey, you're buying this thing from eBay. You're not going to be able to return it, and kind of understanding that consumer awareness. But we let them buy things that we think are a waste of money, because that's how it's better to make that when they're kids and it's a $30 bad decision as opposed to when they're an adult and they're buying a $60,000 lemon of a car, right? So just gaining that, but also we've started to help them understand investing. So they do some saving for longer term, like bigger items. They've kind of learned to budget on their own of like, hey, rather than buying a little thing every month, I'm saving for this one big thing. So I'm not going to buy, you know what I mean? They'll do the like mid kind of short-term savings on their own, but we've helping them started investing. But yeah, I think the biggest thing you can do is help the kids gain awareness of the value of a dollar. So literally my kids were like 5 walking around Target and be like, $15, that's such a waste of money. Like they are understanding, right, the value. And they surprise us because my one son, he's not really a spender. He's kind of like you know what I mean?
He's like you.
He's my artist. He's a musician. Like he's probably not going to be like a Fortune 500 CEO. He's more just like enjoying life, but he also has low needs. Like he's just kind of happy with whatever. So he wasn't really buying anything, but then he saw what he wanted. He loves kind of fantasy, like Star Wars, Harry Potter, Power Rangers. He saw this Power Rangers toy and it was out of production. So it was like a collector's item, basically. It was $80. And we were like, no way we can let him buy this. But he'd been saving his money for so long and he promised he wanted it. We only let them buy new things once a month because we want them to learn like that contentment. And so he had been saying like, this is what he wanted. We're like, okay, like whatever, he'll learn that it's a lot of money. And if he loses track of it, it's such a waste. He carried that thing with him for like years. He never lost it. He totally got the value out of it as opposed to these cheaper toys that they like play with once and abandon because they don't see the value. You know what I mean? Like he really learned to take care of things. And to this day, like when he got glasses, I thought, oh, he's going to lose those. But he's like learned, like when I love something, like I take care of it. And it's just letting them like fail and make these decisions. They kind of learn responsibility over time.
I love that. And at what age would you recommend parents to start to, give that financial freedom? I'm doing air quotes, in a way that you're letting them make the mistakes with their $5, $10.
Yeah. I mean, all our kids from like as long as we've been doing this. So my youngest is 6 already, but he's been participating in this process since as long as we can remember. What I can't tell you for sure is like when our 12-year-old, like this is definitely not my biggest focus. So we're still learning stuff in real time. So like he doesn't have a credit card that he walks around with. You know what I mean? Like we make these decisions like at home and we buy it online for them. We're getting to the point where we'll start to understand the ins and outs of banking. But like I said, we're learning this in real time too. Yeah. And it's okay. Just like it's okay for your kids to make mistakes, it's okay for you to make mistakes as a parent and to figure this out. So
but I think that you're probably ahead of time, with allowing your kids to make the choices and to understand money, because that's one thing that I resent my mom a little bit is I grew up in Brazil. And in Brazil, maybe it was just my house, but not a lot of my friends that I know are financially sound people. In Brazil, you finance a grocery shop. Every month, you're financing in like 30, 60, and 120 days. You're giving checks or splitting payments in a credit card. So everybody's always like chasing the tail.
Right.
And that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. Like I never heard about investments and things like that. So whenever I start to hear about saving, I thought that saving was for rich people. Right. Saving and investing was for rich people. And I'm like, no, they're rich because they're saving. I should be doing that.
Right. Yeah. I've done videos like that talks about like the 3 millionaire myths. And people think millionaires are people who make tons of money, but the majority never made more than 100,000. They're people who learned to spend less than they saved and invest the rest. And people think, oh, investing, that means they're doing like, they know Wall Street, they're following, they're doing crypto. The majority are doing 401ks and IRAs, right? Just the basic accounts, just spending less than they earn and then letting it, and they're like, oh, they're picking hot stocks. And it's like, no, they're just doing basic funds, right? Like maybe aren't that exciting in the short term, but over decades grow to that million. And so, just realizing it's just that little thing, spending less than you earn. And so letting kids understand that on a small level, right? Like they know what credit cards, we talk about that. And so, but don't feel bad. Like if you're just figuring this out. Exactly. It's what you grew up with. And so I take time. I have an investing course and I spend time almost every lesson talking about when you have financial shame, come up, let's mental reframe. So if you have regrets about how you've done money in the past, maybe you didn't invest right away, maybe you have credit card debt, realizing you did the best you could with the knowledge you had at the time. And so when you're getting this, like when you're noticing, oh, I could have done better, reframe it as I am learning more that I can integrate. And now I'm making changes and I'm going to have more success in the future. Because I have that as a parent when I see a little tidbit on Instagram of this is how to talk to your kids. I'm like, oh, I definitely did not do that. And I feel bad, but I'm like, okay,
every day.
Yes, I'm like, you know what? Let's reframe that. I'm learning more and I can apply this going forward. And I do the same with finances. So I'm very big on like not shaming way things people did things in the past, but noticing if there's something you want to do differently, it's not too late to make changes. And it's amazing. Like people say, oh no, I'm in my 40s. I'm like, you have decades. A lot of people don't look at their retirement accounts till they go to retire, like the year before they go to retire. So it's not too late to make changes.
I love that. So kind of going off on a tangent, but not really. You did get a tummy tuck that wasn't covered by insurance. So you value taking care of your body. You look amazing. Yeah. And, you take care of yourself. We can tell that you take care of yourself. So, and oftentimes one thing that I hear from women is that, oh, I cannot invest in my health. I cannot invest in my fitness. Meanwhile, they don't, they're going on vacations that they hate because they get there and they don't like how they look. So they just sit on a chair. So they spend all this money on this bougie ass vacation that they get there and they hate. They don't take photos with their kids. They don't have sex with their husbands because they don't want to be touched. What are the things that you see that women are wasting the most money that they could be using to invest in themselves, either from like a financial standpoint into a retirement plan or investing themselves in their health and fitness? Because ultimately, like your body is an investment. At least I look at it as an investment.
I totally agree. And it's so hard because like I said, I honestly know that people are doing the best they can with what they have at the time. That being said, it takes an investment of time and energy when you want to make progress on something. But so when I talk about financial independence, I mean time freedom. Financial independence is when you reach enough investments to be able to live off your investments alone. And I talk about that not because I want people to be able to just have a pile of money to swim in. It's because I want people to have control of their time. So in my mind, it's not money is the most valuable resource, it's time. And for that reason, the best investment that you can invest in is your health, because you're not just buying like the ability to like look good, whatever. I'm all about like health and wellness and like, right. So like mental health also, like I'm talking about all the health. You're talking about getting more time with your loved ones to do the things that you enjoy. So everyone's going to has a different body type. And for them, being healthy is going to look different. I'm not talking about like a body type outcome, but I went through, like when you're talking about health, it was definitely not an accident. Like I did Weight Watchers, like forever, because nutrition was something that I always had to watch and like be aware of. I had all of these times in my life where I had to figure out exercise, where I had to figure out nutrition, right? It was not something that just like happened by accident, but I was motivated to do it for so many reasons, and much more than like how I looked, you know what I mean, at the beach. It was because the biggest reason was mental health. Like for me, exercise it was like, I mean, trigger warning, like a life and death matter that I'd be able to exercise for my mental wellness. Also nutrition, because I had not great nutrition and it causes inflammation, which negatively, right? So this is not like health recommendations, but for me, like the benefits of taking time to invest in your health, you're talking about you feel better, but also getting those years of your life. I hope that people don't have to get into as mess about as I was mentally to be able to take that time, but just like feel good, like absolutely investing in your health and wellness, I would put above just about anything. That being said, everyone has different financial priorities.
What are the things that you see, Lisa? Because I think that we're very much on the same page with the seeing the value that investing in your health and fitness. And a lot of people say, I don't have the money. But oftentimes what I see is that they don't like the money, they like the priority. So what are the things that you see people, women especially, wasting money on? And I know that wasting money, it's very dependent because everybody is going to appreciate different things. Like your husband likes new cell phones and gadgets and you like to travel in coach.
Yes.
But like, what are the little things that people don't realize that adds up in the grand scheme of things?
It's great when you can track a budget because then you can actually literally see what it is. A lot of it, like subscriptions, let's say, right? And it's noticing the opportunity cost of these things, saying, okay, would I rather have all these, right? Subscriptions, like you said, like vacations. Sadly, like kids' activities can be super expensive. I'm not saying we shouldn't spend money on our kids, but you're saying like, oh, do they have to do all the things all the time? Are they worth more than me? Would they rather have this activity or would they rather have more time with their mom because like she's healthy and well? And like, not to be dramatic, but like that's the kind of the opportunity cost. You have to look at it as like, okay, if I'm trying to save this dollar amount, what things are lower priority to me? So every time we've had a big expense to save for, we had to make sacrifices. And it's a lot easier. I actually talk about this. It's a lot easier to say yes to things. Like it feels better as opposed to saying no to things is a shame. So rather than thinking of saying no to like subscriptions or whatever, you talk about, okay, what am I saying yes to? Right. And then you're figuring out, okay, if I need to save this much, how long will it take me to save for this goal? And then whenever you want to spend on whatever, it's like, oh, would I rather have that or this? And so looking at the opportunity cost of things. And then when you're motivated enough for something, it becomes like the savings kind of do themselves, if that makes sense. Like I'm not so much about telling people like, you can't spend on this, this, and this. I'm more about figuring out what matters to you, what's your priority, and then putting money towards that. And then it's so much easier to want to like eliminate some of these other things, especially when you realize that it's usually not forever. It's usually a finite amount of time because you only need to save so much for X, Y, and Z, you know, and then once you've invested that, it has its rewards. But yeah, health is something that we invest in. We have kind of a bigger food budget because we eat good food for our health.
I love it. I love it. Now, I just remember about something that I wanted to touch before. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on this. This is a post that you made that I literally was in my car and I'm like, yeah, yes, somebody said it. Like it gave me all the feels. So we're kind of going to go back to the beginning of our conversation because I really think that this is so powerful. And I would like you to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to wrap up. So your post said, and I shared it too, because I thought it was beautiful. I once taught a class of teenage girls whose retirement plan was marry a husband with a lucrative career. I also taught a class of single women in their 30s who also grew up with that plan, so they had not saved for retirement. Getting married is not a retirement plan. I have so many feelings about that. So I'm going to let you do the talking.
Yes. I stressed about posting that. I almost didn't. I had to call my sister who had been through a divorce and had been through like just the most financial vulnerable things that you can do and say, do I dare post this? Because a lot of the women that followed me are in that married. Position. You know what I mean? That was their plan. And I'm like, is everyone going to unfollow me if I post this?
Oh, fuck them if they do.
And I was like, but no, I'm like, people need to know. And then I was like, when I'm thinking about the next generation, that's what gave me the courage. Cause I'm like, some of these women are already in tough places and they would never wish this on their daughters. And maybe it's going to help someone. And that's how I get the courage to post things. But just like you said, like people shared it, people are saving it, people are commenting. They're like, yes, this. And so, yeah, it's not a fictional tale. It's a real story of presenting to young women and having this is what happened. They asked me to come teach about budgeting, right? To these young teenage girls. And I said, yes, I will come talk to you about budgeting if you allow me to talk about compound interest, both in terms of how it can get you in trouble with credit cards, and the power of investing. And then how I slid in career development is I said, rather than just picking an imaginary number for your income, here's a list of careers, their starting income and medium income. And at that moment, a bunch of these girls who had all been told, be moms, be moms, be moms, maybe get a backup degree, were all reevaluating their career choices because they realized like this has actual effects on their life, right? And then the leader
Lost her mind.
These group, she interrupted me and said, "Oh, girls, this is why you marry a rich husband." And I was livid because I thought, there's no way. Like, this is, I really felt like I was being not controversial by saying, hey, maybe prepare for a career.
Oh my God.
So for her to cut me off and say, oh, girls, like, you look stressed. Don't worry about it. Just marry a rich husband. It was so upsetting to me.
How does one say this with a straight face?
I know. So because I had just presented to these women who were in their 30s, who had grown up in a similar culture, who were all of a sudden panicking and realizing their plan to marry a rich husband hadn't panned out, and maybe they should start saving for retirement. And so I could see this playing out, like, just statistically, right? Divorce, separation, death, all these reasons, right? Like not getting married. There's all these reasons to prepare for a career. And it was like so upsetting to me because I'm like, well, I'm in the room for this conversation, but there's so many conversations that I'm not in the room for that are being had where this idea is being taught. So all I can do is put it out there on Instagram. But yeah, that's a good point. I should repost that because people need to know. Marriage is great. I love it, but it should not be the plan, the financial plan.
You know what's funny? It's that obviously my husband and I have had this conversation, and I think it's interesting because people are like, oh, it's easy for you to say because your husband was a professional athlete. I never stopped working.
Yeah.
I never stopped working the whole time that I was with him. And then whenever he did retire, then it got to a point that it was a lot of the decisions that we were making in a financial standpoint was based on my earning. So, and I loved it that you said that sometimes these things don't pan out. And that is the problem, because obviously nobody gets married wishing to get a divorce. But if you get married with somebody who turns out to be an asshole, and your whole plan is to marry rich, and that's your retirement plan, so you're going to stay in a relationship, in a marriage with somebody who can be abusive, or he can might not respect you, might not be cheating on you left and right, but that just because that is your retirement plan, it doesn't give you the option.
Yes, no, exactly. And that's why my thing is financial education, because financial education will improve a good marriage and it will protect you from a bad one, right? And that's when you can start to see that play out in these conversations, is how is this information? Because in a healthy marriage, they can think, oh, this is good. They want the equality. They want people coming to the table knowing what they want, being able to help the family with this information. And if they see it as a threat, there's your red flag.
Yeah, the red flags are waving around and things like that. Oh my God. Lisa, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. I honestly, in the name of my podcast is Unfiltered Fit Life. So I think that whenever we're talking about all these topics that might be sensitive and delicate for some people, that's what I want this podcast to be about, to talk about the difficult topics, the hard conversations that need to be had. Tell us a little bit, our listeners, where they can find you, where they can learn more about your work. I signed up for your Money Free Challenge.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Money Fit Moms everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever. But yeah, the thing that I created was my free Money Fit Challenge. And that was born out of the idea of what can people sign up for? So it's an email challenge where you get one challenge per week. It's basically what I felt like were the most important financial tasks to do. And no matter where you are, it's a great process to gain awareness, right? So the first challenge is calculating your net worth, because I think even if you're not going to budget, it's a great way to see your financial progress, whether it's paying off debt, investing, or spending less than you earn. That's all going to be done in your net worth. And I show tools so that you can do it right for free in 5 minutes. And so it's everyone that I know has great reviews, which makes me feel really good, but also that it's free, right? That I'm not here to gatekeep. I want everyone to be able to gain this financial education. That's why I do it. And so that's why I create it. That's my kind of like signature offering is like, hey, gain some awareness. And every once in a while I'll get an email back saying, I'm a single mom and this has helped me so much, or we're a married couple and it's just helped us have these conversations. And it feels so good because I'm in this for the impact.
I love it. I love your posts. Whenever you want to make some controversial posts, message me because I'm always going to be like, yes, go for it. Go for it.
Because you're my cheerleader.
Because I do think that these conversations need to be had. I'm very much looking forward to doing your challenge because I think that you can always learn. That's not my field of expertise at all. I'm trying to educate myself. And I think that people like you is what women and some men out there need to not become a burden to their children whenever we're old. And that's kind of the way I personally look at it as well. Lisa, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. I love your energy.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment or voice message at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on Instagram and let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. As for today, this is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.